In the previous lecture modules, we explored that first thesis or project in BonJour's paper. We examined the epistemic regress argument and saw how the foundationalist uses it both to introduce this idea of justificational transfer via inference, such that antecedently justified beliefs are capable of transferring their justification through inference to the inferred beliefs, so that justification can be percolating through a belief edifice. However, the epistemic regress problem that they highlight in their argument consists in the idea that this principle of justificational transfer doesn't result in any generation or origination of justification, that there are no original thoughts of justification that can serve as the beginnings from which all that justification can then flow and percolate through the belief edifice. And so they hypothesize that there are these basic beliefs. These beliefs are intrinsically justified. They are justified independent of inference. They are novel, original sources of justification, and that justification can then flow through inferential transfer to the other beliefs in the knowledge edifice. And they then argue that the epistemic regress problem is the fundamental problem of justification in epistemology, and their solution is the only solution to the epistemic regress problem, and hence their view about justification has to be the correct view about justification, since it's the only view that works. In this module and the rest of the lecture, we transition to BonJour's second thesis or project, and that project is a critical assessment of foundationalism. And we can sort of think about it in terms of the relationship between Descartes on the one hand and those critics of Descartes that point to the Cartesian circle. Critics of Descartes say, look, Descartes, you motivate your view by introducing this very powerful skeptical argument, by creating this external world skepticism. And then you propose and advocate for your view as a solution to external world skepticism, such that even the external world skeptic would have to accept your view. However, your view doesn't actually solve the problem that you try to use to motivate your view. Your view doesn't actually, in a non-question begging fashion, refute external world skepticism. And BonJour's argument against his critical assessment of foundationalism mirrors this very nicely. BonJour wants to argue, look, the foundationalists, right, they introduce these two mechanisms through which a belief can get justification. There is this mechanism of being a basic belief, whereby you are the font of justification. You are an original source. You are intrinsically justified. And that justification that you have, that we don't need to explain in any other way, that justification can then be transferred via this principle of inferential justification to all the other beliefs in the belief edifice. And so every belief that isn't a basic belief will get its justification by this epistemic justificational regress, whereby an antecedent belief that's already justified transfers its justification through inference in the same way that the relay runner transfers the baton to the next runner. And we see that when we follow those chains backwards, they end, in all cases where we have a justified belief that we started with, they end with a basic belief, a belief that actually has its own intrinsic source of justification. And BonJour is going to reject that idea. He's going to claim that the notion of basic empirical beliefs is internally incoherent, that there can't be this class of beliefs that have this property and function in this way within epistemology. So how's he going to try and establish that? Well, he's going to start by articulating a notion of justification. Specifically, he's going to say, look, every theory of justification is going to have to provide this connection between a belief and the reasons why you have that belief and what he calls the cognitive goal of truth. So that in order to be justified in believing something, we have to have at least potentially have a grasp of the relationship between evidence and the belief, such that we see that the belief is likely to be true. That if we don't have that, we can't say that a belief is justified. So that justification links beliefs internally through our own cognitive possession of that connection between the belief and the reasons why it's true. However, he wants to say that kind of linkage is only capable of being generated by inference. That is, we never in a position to say that a belief is in fact justified without being capable of recognizing that there is some inference that tells us how it is that there are reasons that actually make that belief more likely to be true. Inference is the mechanism that connects beliefs to that cognitive goal of truth. And he in fact says, look, when you actually think about how it would be that we would be able to recognize and utilize a basic belief, he says, what we really discover is that there is this counterfactual general inference. I can give you the schema for that inference, whereby we recognize that that belief is basic. So no matter what property you suppose the belief has, in virtue of which it is a basic belief, our ability to utilize it as a basic belief for the purposes of justification, that requires our ability to grasp an inference that establishes its membership in that class of basic beliefs, and hence it isn't really basic because it isn't non-inferentially justified for us. Our only way of being justified in believing that belief is through our ability to at least tacitly grasp that general inference schema and see potentially its applicability to that case. And as a result, basic beliefs they're not coherent. It's not a coherent notion. And so in the next lecture module, we'll begin working our way through his argument against his critical assessment of foundationalism.